Let's talk about your draft strategy for your fantasy football drafts. This is the first time we're going to cover draft strategies, and we're going to talk about running back specifically, and more specifically, hero running back, which is where you grab a running back in the first round and build your team around that running back, or zero running back, where you skip running back altogether up front and wait on running back. And what the data here shows is that waiting on running back historically has proven to be the right move, and we're going to tell you why, and we're going to show you the data as to why. Hero running back in particular is effective given the success of first-round running back compared to the peers. In the past, you can see, according to this set of numbers here, double running back actually worked. Between 2015 and 2017, which is what this data here shows, the running back points consistently dropped from round to round. So you see, round one was 17 points per game, and then 15, and then 13 and a half, and then 11, and then 12, and then 10, right? So
thank you, Todd Gurley.
Exactly. Running backs in this time, and this is really before we got into really heavy committee backfields, right? This is why you see the top really have a big difference between the bottom. Running backs in this time had clear-cut roles. Zeke Elliott in his rookie year fell in this time frame. The point of stagnation at this point in time came in the 7th round. You see the 7th round, you go down to 9 points per game, where you most likely had your starting running backs by that point. That's how it was. And back in the day, running backs ran fantasy football, okay? Then we have this transition period from 2018 to 2020. This timeline here consisted of some heavy dominance of running backs drafted in the first round, right? Because here you see a 19.5 point per game average from 2018 to 2020, and this is when that really good class of running backs came in from 2017 to 2018, right? Mm-hmm. And they had 19.5 points per game for an average of a running back being drafted in the first round. And then you see a 4-point drop-off to round 2, and then a 2.5 point drop-off to round 3. And then it's pretty even all the way through round 6, and then round 7 you start declining a little bit again. But again, even rounds 3 through 9 only has a 3-point or 2.5 point per game difference. So the point differential between the first round and any other round in the draft pretty much forced people's hands to try to get running backs up front. It made guys like Dalvin Cook a must draft in the first round, right? That's where we were in fantasy football, and even you saw that in Dynasty fantasy football, where Dalvin Cook was a first round player for a long time. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that's what the running back landscape used to look like, and why it was always advantageous to grab a running back up front. But let's look at the present, because the running back landscape as a whole in the NFL has really shifted, right? In the present, running backs have become a lot less of a focus in early rounds because committee backfields have become increasingly popular. And because of this, the zero running back strategy, where you do not take running back up front and you punt that position and you grab those later in the draft, has not only become increasingly popular, it's become more successful. This shows all across the board in fantasy football, league winning data, in best ball, playoff advance rates. You see it everywhere. It doesn't matter if you miss out on running back up front. You have just as good a chance to advance to the playoffs as you do any other way. You can, the more wide receivers you have, statistically, the better. With that being said, let's look at 2021 to 2023, where we've been in this new age right now. In the first round, 17 points per game. You'll notice it's a pretty stark difference from the 19.5 in that 3-year period before, right? In the first round. Second round, 15.5. Third round, 14. Fourth round, 12. Fifth round, 9. Sixth round, 11.5. Seventh round, 11.5. 9 in the 8th round. In the 10th round, 10 points per game.
Almost no difference between rounds 5 and 10. Like 5 through 10.
Look at 12.
It's all the
12 and 5 have the same points per game.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing here is it's pretty well spread out after you. I mean, clearly, right? Clearly up top, you see a good step down. You see the step down 1.5, step down 1.5, step down a point, whatever. After that, though, I mean, it's pretty even. Mm-hmm. Here are the major points of emphasis from the last couple of years as we've transitioned into this new running back landscape. The benefit of a first-round running back has declined in recent years, which we know is true, right?
Yes.
You have a lot less. We did a video where we talked about this in the year of the running back video, right? We've had a lot less running backs average like over 20 points per game in PPR leagues than we used to.
And a big thing to note about that too is that the fantasy community is catching on. So there are, again, much fewer. They caught, but much fewer of them have gone high, like super, super high in the first couple rounds compared to, any other era beforehand. So there is kind of potentially a shift in theory, which we talked about in previous videos as well. But that's interesting to note.
Yeah. The value of a running back drafted in round 4 versus the value of a running back drafted in round 1, when you're talking about their price versus their production, the value is almost the same. Like 12 points per game in the 4th round compared to 17 points per game in the first round. Like, I'd have a hard time deciding which one I think is more valuable when you're giving up so much wide receiver value up top. And we'll talk about wide receivers here in a second. It's not a steady decline. It has become even more erratic. People fear uncertainty. Running backs now are more uncertain than they ever have been. There's so much uncertainty. Let's look specifically, I'll let you kind of look at this. Let's look specifically at 2023 and how these rounds and points per game by round sorted out last year.
Yeah, 2023 was an absolute dumpster fire. In round one, you had 17 points per game, which again was on par for the entirety of this era, 21 to 2023. But again, if you're drafting a running back not named Christian McCaffrey in the first round, you were screwed last year. Like it sucked. You weren't like totally dead in the water, but you didn't.
Like Bijan underperformed, Eckler way underperformed.
A lot of underwhelming production for sure outside of Christian McCaffrey. Round 2, 15.5. Round 3, 13 or almost 14. Round 4, 12. Round 5, huge dip, 9 points per game, and then you got a little spike in round 6 to 7. Both 11.5 points per game. And then way down again, 9 and 8 points per game in rounds 8 and 9. And then back up again in round 10, 10 points per game. Like, it was all over the place. There were just pockets of running backs that if you took shots on them at price, were going to hit or were not going to hit. If you remember the running backs that were going in the second and third round last year that were disappointing, Saquon Barkley was on par. Josh Jacobs, definitely not on par. He incredibly disappointing, his production last year. Jonathan Taylor, before all of the injury stuff, kind of escalated, he was going in that range until you got closer and closer to the season. Were there any other guys there?
I mean, Ramondre was going in the 4th.
Tony Pollard was going early
was
second.
Going there, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys last year that just weren't performing well, and you saw that play out when you drafted a running back at that price.
Yep. And then round 6 and 7 was that spike. So you're like, what running backs were going in that range last year? Because, again, it was just all over the place.
James Cook, Alvin Kamara, Rashad White, James Conner, who was good for a minute there. David Montgomery was pretty solid last year. And so, I mean, again, a lot of those guys you'd rather have over guys you were taking last year in the second or third round of fantasy drafts. Yep. And it just goes to show how much parity there is at that position, especially.
Right.
I mean, in this data you just mentioned, round 4 was equal to round 7, greater than by a little bit. Round 5 was outproduced by round 10. It clearly, I mean, it doesn't matter. First round running backs, yes, they're safe. I mean, the most obvious trend you see here year over year
is a drop off after round 1.
And even a little bit after round 2.
Yep.
Which is why, if you want to go the hero running back route and take one running back and then build around them, it's not a bad decision.
In fact, this year it might be a good decision.
Might be the decision.
Might be the decision.
I think that might, based on the first round running backs being hyper productive, and after that there's a lot of uncertainty. I think the best thing to do is either completely punt running back this year at the beginning of drafts and just go wide receiver, or draft a running back in the first round. Bijan, Breece Hall, Christian McCaffrey. If you don't get one of those three guys, draft wide receiver. If you do, draft wide receiver until the 7th round again.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's interesting to look at some of the wide receiver data from 2023 specifically too, to see if that's even a complementary strategy. Because you can say, go hero running back with your strategy, take one at top in the first round, and then after that you go receivers the next couple of rounds. Well, was that complementary last year in 2023? I would argue that it was. You're looking at 19 points per game in the first round, which again is going to be more than it was at the running back position. But then you look after that, rounds 2, 3, and 4, 15, 13, 17 points per game in round 4.
I know.
Higher than both rounds 2 and 3. So if you're going hero running back in the first round, you're pretty comfortable taking wide receivers in that range in 2024 because again, there's so many of them.
And again,
so many of them.
There's a huge drop-off in production after the first 4 rounds here.
Yep.
So the difference in value between a first through 4th round wide receiver and then the field, and then a first or 4th round running back in the field, it's totally different. There's a clear advantage to getting the top wide receivers, where with running back, you can get lucky on running back later. Now, you do have some random examples here, like the 12th round, there was 11 points per game. But again, you saw a pretty steady decline. 12, 10, 8, 5, 9, and then 11, then 7 and 6. So like outside of that outlier round, it was a pretty steady decline. Meaning, again, the advantage that you have of taking a wide receiver up front, even in the first 2 rounds, you have to. Here's the main takeaway from this: you absolutely this year have to come out of your fantasy draft with a wide receiver in one of the first 2 rounds.
Yes,
and the other pick either needs to be McCaffrey, Gibbs, or Bijan, or another receiver.
Breece.
Oh, yeah. No, sorry. I said Gibbs. I meant Breece.
yeah.
Breece, Bijan, McCaffrey, or receiver. So, again, in the first 2 rounds, there are 3 running backs this year that I think it's smart to take. And outside of that, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, so let's put some more names to that theory as well, because again, if you're going hero RB and you're taking one of those top guys, who are you taking in the later rounds? Who are you eyeing in the later rounds?
This is a good question. And honestly, like between I get there. Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, and Devon Achane. Here are guys later in the draft that I'm just as confident could end up being running back ones. Guess who's in the same spot? Rashad White. Right? Alvin Kamara's down here. David Montgomery, Ramondre Stevenson, Joe Mixon.
Ramondre is huge for me.
Ramondre's a big one.
Jonathan Brooks is kind of a ceiling pick there. I know he's a rookie and all that stuff, but it's kind of baked into his price coming off of an injury. RB23.
Raheem Mostert is the running back 28. That's a guy who was a top 5 running back last year, right?
Which you would expect is not going to happen again, given the touchdown rate and his lack of overall yardage, which was under 1,000 yards.
But if I had to go over/under on running back 28, I would go over.
You go over, yeah.
And I think with Pollard's at running back 29, he's a guy I think this year that could...
He's my favorite running back value. I think he's the guy that's going to knock it out of the park for you if you take him at price this year.
And so it just goes to show that, and again, I think this is absolutely the case. There are 3 running backs you're taking this year: McCaffrey, Bijan, Breece Hall. Yep. And this sucks because I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I love Jonathan Taylor, right? I'm a Colts fan.
Yep.
I love Saquon. But honestly, the data shows, I mean, I don't know if you would agree with me, the data shows that we really shouldn't be taking those guys probably in fantasy drafts this year.
I think, which again, we've talked about this, like, I think the data can show one thing versus the other, because we've done other running back research videos that suggest that we might be seeing a flip this year as well, given just the volume of running backs that have been going up top versus not, and the age.
I think the flip comes here, though, and not here. I think the flip's at the very top, because really we've seen that lack of very top production.
Yeah.
In like first round, like elite
I think
production.
You could still go hero RB and take a wide receiver round 1 and then a running back round 2 if you really wanted to. If you got a screaming value at wide receiver at the tail end of the first.
So you would argue
like if Puka, for example, Puka would be a big reason for that this year. If you're at the 111 and Puka falls to you, you're taking Puka.
So you would make the argument that round 1 tier actually extends to Saquon.
I think it
from a production standpoint.
That's just my personal opinion. Again, that's based off of this specific data. I'm technically wrong, but again,
no, but
every year is unique.
But I actually that makes more sense to me. I do think I'm going to be a lot less inclined to draft one of Gibbs, Taylor, and Barkley and pair them with a wide receiver than I would draft one of the first 3 running backs and pair them with a wide receiver in the second. That's my first choice for sure. Like I think that the guy, when I think there's going to be an adjustment from a running back standpoint, I think it's going to be up top. I think you're going to have 3 guys average over 20 points per game this year.
I definitely think you could. And when you're looking at that round 4 spike at the wide receiver position in 2023, where they average 17 points per game, 17 and a half, here are the wide receivers that are going in that range from an ADP perspective. Zay Flowers going in the 4th round, or 3-4 turn. George Pickens, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Hollywood Brown. Which one of those guys are your favorite options there?
We've already talked at length about Hollywood Brown.
Yeah,
I really like him.
I like Hollywood. I like Amari Cooper, and Zay Flowers is my other pick there. A lot of people are going to scream George Pickens, and honestly, if we were to see another spike like this in the 4th round, George Pickens would be a big reason for that. I'm not betting on George Pickens this year. I hope he does well, and I hope he finds success with Russell Wilson. But I just don't know. I'd rather take a shot on a guy like Amari Cooper, who's just been consistent. That's the name of his game since he came into the league. So those are some targets that you could look for in that range with that trend that we saw in 23.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let us know. Are you comfortable with the hero running back strategy? Do you tend to go 0 running back? I know the overwhelming consensus is for people to go wide receiver. I know everybody loves wide receivers. I want to hear some running back specific strategy. I don't want to hear the same old thing I hear every single day on Twitter and YouTube and whatever. Tell me what you think about running backs this year. Do us a huge favor. If you play fantasy, drop a like and make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. Also, our 2024 draft guide is now available on flockfantasy.com/domain. I put the link in the description. If you sign up for any tier, whether that's monthly, annual, whatever, you're going to get our draft guide. Our draft guide is 50 pages long. It features a ton of positional strategy, round by round analysis, and also overviews of each one of these strategies, draft strategies that we talked about in this video. And so you can get this to use during your draft, study up, make sure you know the best values at every position, make sure you know which way we're leaning with drafts this year, and you get one of those, like I said, link in the description, flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain, choose the mother flocker tier. Any membership will get you this draft guide. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you later.